All right. So hopefully this works out. I mean, we've had our fair share, even now this thing is reconnecting. So we've had our fair share of technical hiccups up until this point. But basically, we are in the studio. We're trying to determine a time where we can go live essentially and have messaging that's pushed out on a regular basis. And we hope that we can strike that level of balance as we move forward. But again, serving as a platform where we can have conversations in a way that's a little easier to share with other people. It doesn't
Yeah.
have quite the delay between.
Sharing is caring.
Yes, exactly. As I was editing one of the small pieces today. So, yeah, but we have a guest here with us tonight by the name of Nick King. He's joining us from the north.
Way up north, yeah.
In Canada.
The frozen north.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick it over to a triple view here, so folks can see not on that one, but our virtual guest here.
There we go.
And then we can see Nick coming in, joining us tonight. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hey there.
Excellent. Fantastic.
So Nick was down here in the physical studio space, I guess, maybe about a month ago, somewhere in that zone.
I think it was early December, yeah.
Early December. So
Yep.
I think it'd be great to just sort of do an introduction, a bit of an introduction, and then maybe give some background for where you and Ernest obviously have a long history together, and kind of give some background on that as well.
And it's just kind of the way life is. It's a small world, and you meet people along the way on this planet, third rock from the sun, flying through the universe. And, I'm born and raised here in Washington, D.C., and, I've never left, so,
Yeah.
People come into town every now and then and, reconnect. But I just randomly got this message through our service, and I was like, King. And then I got further communication. It was like, yeah, by the way, I know you. And I was like, wow, no. And sure enough. So, yeah, Nick and I have go way back high school times.
Yep.
You were at Sidwell Friends, right?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in DC as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were in a group of friends in the DC area.
Yeah.
I think our common friend was a guy named Jorge Rivas, who
Yes.
was from Greenbelt, Maryland, and at some point switched over to going to the school I was attending,
Yeah.
which was, Sidwell.
Uh-huh.
Back then it was a little bit of a sleepier little Quaker school rather than the powerhouse it is now.
Yeah.
And I did leave DC and have moved around quite a bit and wound up in Montreal, Canada, where I'm now a faculty member at McGill University. And I was down in DC dealing with a family medical emergency and really desperately needed someone to help. And I was talking to my partner Jennifer, and she sent me the website. She said, well, this looks like a good place. And I called it up, and there was a big picture of Ernest. And I was like,
Wait a second.
I know that guy. And indeed I did. And I used your little web portal, and I couldn't say anything. But then when I talked to you, I said, in addition to me desperately needing your expertise, we knew each other when we were teenagers. And
Yeah. No, it was great. And, it was just a flashback, it was just like, yeah. And it's one of those things. It's, we have memories as we move forward in life and experiences. Certainly back then in DC, it was a very different era. It was post Ronald Reagan, and, we were bumping around DC, punk rock era. And but, things come back again, That's the breath of life, right? So,
Had there been any, outside of just seeing that image of Ernest, he's rocking the beard on the website too. So, I mean,
Old Man Brown.
were you seeing that? And was that the first time since sort of parting ways a long time ago that you guys have had any kind of interaction, or
Yeah.
really?
well, I have to be honest here, which is the reason I recognize it is we are in fact Facebook friends, and I believe that image on the website is similar to images on Facebook, because if it weren't for that, I recognize the name,
Yeah.
but I don't think I would have made the connection. It was the visual, like, oh, yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
not really.
it would have been fascinating if it hadn't been like on Facebook that we knew each other, but you had asked
Yeah.
the service and I just kind of showed up and be like, that would have been like, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been
Exactly.
incredible.
Because
Well,
we both look very different. Both of us have much less hair than we
I'm
did
so
back
happy I don't have hair. Oh
the
my
natural
God.
progression.
Yes. It's
Oh
great.
man.
Well,
Save.
I was very curious. When I initially met you, the attraction for me, I think, was that I am dating a girl in Canada, and I know that you're up in Canada. So I mean, curious about that move and what led you there, and the steps that push you past the border, basically.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the main, I mean, the 5 second answer is a job, or actually two jobs. My partner she's also a professor. We're both professors, and it's very difficult to find two jobs if you're both
Oh, yeah.
in academia. And we were able to secure jobs at McGill. And I had visited Montreal a number of times because I lived in Boston for 6 years. That's where I went to grad school. And I visited Montreal, and it had always been on the list of places that it would seem cool to live. And immediately before moving here, we were living in Cleveland, and Montreal just seemed like a fun, interesting place to go. And we decided to do the move, and we really like a lot of things about being here. And we had a kid who's our anchor baby. So now we've stayed here for 12 years now, actually.
Wow. 12
Yeah.
years. That's fantastic.
Would there be any incentive at any point to shift back into the States? I know some people are sort of transient. They'll go, back and forth. And I guess there are some working relationships between the two countries that make that more possible than other spots. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, DC is still home to me. As Ernest said, it's changed a lot. I mean, it's completely unrecognizable now.
Yeah.
Where people will be visiting DC and they'll say, "Hey, where's a cool place to go?" And I say, "I don't know," because the places I thought were cool are all gone, and the entire. I mean, everyone says this about their cities, that it's gentrified and completely changed, but DC, man, is really different. But I've always thought of it as home, and living abroad. So, I live in Montreal, which is in Quebec, which is the francophone province in Canada, and I call it the uncanny valley because it's really similar to living in the US, but there are incredibly stark and crucial differences. And the similarities lull you into sort of a false sense of security. When you travel abroad, if you go, I remember going to Costa Rica or to Indonesia, where it's different, and you never forget that you're in a different place. Here, aside from the French, you'll kind of forget, and then something will happen and you'll say, whoa, there are these cultural codes or assumptions that I didn't get.
Yeah.
And so, it's forced me to recognize how American I am in ways that I never would have predicted.
Sure.
So yeah, I've always assumed there would be a return. But
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we want to kind of branch out, from DC. We have lots of stories to tell here, but it's unique. This is an opportunity to kind of bounce around the globe and see things, and certainly our friends up north, and the model in terms of medical care, which is critical, and that speaks very much to your role as a professor in medical ethics. Tell me a little bit more about what, how did you find yourself going down this path?
yeah, it's another great question. It's been a really weird, twisty journey. After I graduated from college, it was 1991, and I decided I wanted to be a musician, so I moved to Seattle and played in some noise bands for a few years, worked in a record store, back in the day. but I always sort of assumed I would go back to grad school, and I was really interested in health policy. Um, and I wound up getting a PhD in a field, history of science, that seemed like it would work, but upon finishing the PhD, I said, this is not for me, but now I have an advanced degree. Where are intellectual homes that will allow me to think critically and deeply about health policy and ethical issues? And, bioethics is kind of, it's this big umbrella. And I had sort of a tortuous academic journey, but basically found this little niche that allows me to do a lot of different things without being pigeonholed into one particular, you must stay on this straight path.
And that's exactly the same as it is for me. So that's why it's fascinating to hear your story, because that's exactly for myself. I started off in the hardcore sciences, biochemistry and molecular biology. That was my groove. But then things, and it's important to kind of understand what, resonates in you that's going to, inspire you and make you jump out of bed in the morning, right? So,
Right.
and here we are, we find ourselves,
Yeah. And I think I think a lot of people have more twisty journeys, but we tend to, there's so much push to narrate your own life as though it was perfectly planned and followed a path that you set out. And
Boring.
If only.
Yes.
I know some of those people. There are people who decided at age 15 what they were going to do and did
Yeah.
it. But for so many of us, it's you make these decisions and you wind up in new places.
And the thing is, life is changing. I mean, it's the same thing. Like even for my dad worked for NASA for 44 years.
Right.
So it was like, okay, that doesn't happen.
Long time.
And it's about evolving, right? And
Yeah.
you have to. I like to say it is that I'm always hustling.
Yeah.
Maybe the connotation isn't great, but there's a certain sense of you take life and what it gives you, and you have to adapt to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think especially
And you're-
today too, there's so many, I think people today, especially in my generation, are more opportunist when it comes to employment opportunities. And there's definitely a shift away from corporate structure into entrepreneurial, ventures. A lot of people are pursuing that today that may not have in the past. And I look at my own dad and mom, who are career teachers, 39 and 35 years in the classroom, and loved every day of it. But that was their day to day. They didn't really. They had side hobbies, of course, and things they pursued in the summer. But otherwise, they were a very traditionalist path when it came to their careers. So,
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. My dad worked at the World Bank for 45, 50 years.
Right? Yes, it's insane.
And I mean, the funny thing is, I'm in one of the few positions where you do have job security to a certain extent, right? I have tenure, the tenure's being phased out.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm sort of seeing how ossified and stuck you get, right? Like the stereotype of the professor who's absent-minded and can only focus on one thing, that's rooted in reality. And I think, hustling is hard. Freelancing is really hard, but staying stuck, I think it's actually better to be able to be flexible enough to have skills that you can apply them to different things. I think it keeps you fresh.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that with you and Ernest, you have skills and you've invented a career for yourself in many ways.
Had to, because otherwise, it would just suffocating, in what we have for healthcare in the U.S. So, and I'm a family physician. I'm a dinosaur. We will fail to exist. We don't factor in. We don't fit in with the economics or of profit, essentially. So,
You can come to Canada. There's still There's still family medicine. And community
Save
medicine.
me a space. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's been a point of curiosity for me, actually, is could Ernest do what he does in DC, but in a Canadian setting? Would that be something that, is a possibility for someone like him? Because there are very few people, I think, maybe 3 or 4 house call docs who operate in a similar fashion in DC. But you've turned it into something it's also very fruitful. It's an opportunity for you to expand your business and care for more people. And I think that can be really challenging when you're tackling it on your own. Very, very, very tough.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in one sense, you couldn't
Yeah.
because it's a universal healthcare single payer, and in Canada, there's no parallel private system, right? So in some countries, in the UK, there are different models in Germany and France. You can have both the universal, the government run system, but people can also opt out and buy parallel private care. In Canada, that's basically outlawed. There is a parallel private system, but only for things that are not covered by Medicare, which is the name for the universal health care. So in a way, you can't. You could do your own practice, but it would be very limited to things that aren't already covered in that way.
Botox and and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, no,
Imaging,
yeah.
imaging and testing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well,
you
I
can
mean,
do that.
that's the thing. I mean, I never fashioned myself having to do what I do in the way that I do it. I just could not feel I could practice as a physician and do medicine if there is a Medicare for all system that would just allow me to just let me be a doctor and not bury me in paperwork or coding and cut the time that I have with my patients down to nothing, so that I feel that I'm just a factory worker. Then forget it. I don't. I mean, on just 2 days ago, I was with a patient in the hospital for 8 hours straight. I
Wow.
picked them up from their home,
8 hours.
drove them to
Yeah.
the hospital because she needed an advocate, and you can't do that in a practice. And
Right.
so I do like the idea of socialized medicine if they allow medicine to actually work as a physician, to practice in that way. Because, for Medicare, for seniors here in the U.S., there is coverage for house calls. And in fact, we've lobbied back in 2008, lobbied before Congress for a bill which was basically passed, the Independence at Home Act, which provided an opportunity to look at how we can save money by providing care in the home. And that has been demonstrated. There's no question. And the same thing, would extend to anywhere in the world, honestly, that you don't have to go to a clinic or a hospital when medicine is just like it's everywhere. I mean, you can care for anybody. I mean, I literally took care of somebody this morning on a sidewalk, as I was going to.
Really?
So it was like, hey, Dr. Brown. And then next thing I know, I'm getting roped in. And, that's one of the beauties I feel of being independent is, being able to just breathe and live medicine.
Yeah.
So.
And do you feel like there's there will be more opportunities in the future for that kind of like independent house call based kind of work?
Well, the thing is, for me as a physician, I need to focus on caring for patients.
Yeah.
And so I serve as an advocate for patients. But I need patients to advocate for me in the sense that I cannot be my own advocate. Just like my patients, sometimes they struggle to be able to do that. And if we can't, have people advocating for the care that they deserve and need, then, I just simply don't have the time. That's why, basically, I said, I forget this. I'm just going to do what I know to do, and don't get in my way. I need those people who receive that care to stand up and have their voices heard, and that's why this is, essentially an opportunity or a platform in which we might be able to do that. We'd love to hear from more people, more stories. I mean, that's the whole essence of Earnest Medicine, is the stories that intertwine us, that connect us.
Yeah.
And but I would say it is. I mean, you have organizations like the American Medical Association. Right.
Had a good
Which is-
history lesson on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But who is speaking? And here in the U.S., if I go and work, even right next door, office building we have right next door, and I have to screw in a light bulb. Well, I'm unionized, so I'm protected. Here, as a physician, we can't. And so we have no representation. We have no means to be able to negotiate, or organizations that are supposed to represent us certainly don't. Mm-hmm. So I say get rid of all of that. Yeah. And the people who should advocate are the patients that I serve. Right. And they have done that. I've had patients write to their congressman. I've had patients write to city council, and it's unfortunate that just to receive the care that they need, they have to do that. Yeah. But I think if we can gather enough support and enough people join us in this journey, then we can affect some change. But it takes time, and I understand that.
Yeah, it's a long game, I think.
Yeah,
very much
and that's
so.
okay for me. I'm not getting any younger, but I do have to think about legacy. I have to think about who's coming next, right? Mm-hmm. I have to think about what is it going to look like for a physician to be able to just practice in the future. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just going to be algorithms and avatars and machine learning, right? And then then I'm out.
And there's a super important word that you've used several times, which is advocate, and advocating on behalf of your patients. And I teach in a medical school, and I teach medical students, and I teach ethics and policy. And there's always a little bit of a hill because although it's changed a lot, we still put science and sort of the harder sciences at the center of how we select for people who become doctors. And a lot of the medical education, and it's very similar in the US and Canada, your first year or two before you see any patients, it's almost all science-based. Mm-hmm. But so much of daily practice has nothing to do with the Krebs cycle, Yeah. And it's about advocating. And I want, who are you advocating to? What you'd think that, well, once they get to the hospital, that's it. You don't need any advocating. So what does the advocating mean?
Well, I think it's because you have to think of these institutions, a clinic or even an emergency room, they are confined artificial environments. It doesn't bring with it the full breadth of what brought the patient in. Quite often, there's so much detail that's missing. And even that was the reason for being there 8 hours with this patient, was to be able to impress upon my colleagues that, look, this has not been working. This has been bounced around and punted long enough, and we have to effect a change. And I can say that without that, she would have been punted again, And it's unfortunate, and it does take me away. Then who else could I have been caring for? And to have to do that, it's not every time, and it's not every day that I'm 8 hours in emergency room advocating. Yeah. But when duty calls, people know that that's what I'm there to do. So, and I'm not there to I'm really there as kind of like a Sherpa to kind of guide things in any way that I can. I'm certainly not a magician, and I don't have a magic wand, but I can cut through things to be able to get to what really is the problem, and work with colleagues in a way. And I can say that when I do bring my patients, my colleagues in the emergency room or in clinics, or even yesterday I took a patient, picked him up from home and took him to his ear, nose, and throat doctor. Mm-hmm. And it's a patient with dementia, so they can't, advocate for themselves. Yeah. And no family here. Yeah, so, it's countless stories. And that's a large part of what we're trying to do, because these stories are up here. And when my time comes, that those stories will be gone. But if we can kind of capture these things and show them, and get people to come along.
Right. Well, that was a question I wanted to follow up on with Nick was about transparent science because, this is something that you've approached and a project that you've spearheaded up at McGill, and I was curious to hear a little bit more. It's one of the things you included whenever we had our form submitted, and I just felt like I got a taste of it. It didn't dive in as nearly as far as I'd like to know because I think this is sort of your bread and butter. This is what you're passionate about, and it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, so this is a project that has been underway for 4 years, but we're still just beginning it. And I'm working on it with a friend and colleague, Derek Ruths, who's a computer scientist here. Okay. So there's an art and there's a science in medicine, and ideally they work together. And in the past, 30 or 40 years, there's been this big movement called evidence-based medicine that has been saying, physicians need to make decisions based on the best available evidence of what drugs work and what don't for which patients, which interventions are superior, are more cost effective, what's best for patients. Certainly your clinical experience will guide your judgment, but there's this incredible amount of information that's out there. And we want to convince not just doctors, but a lot of different people to make decisions based on the evidence we have, and we need good evidence. One of the problems is that the evidence base can be manipulated, and one of the ways that it can be manipulated is that powerful interests, pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, will pay for studies to be done to produce conclusions that they want, that drugs actually work, or their new drug is superior to an existing drug that's much cheaper or generic.
Yeah.
Or people with cardiac problems, you need to do invasive surgery and put a cardiac stent in them rather than just tell them to exercise a bit more, right? Yeah. So this was recognized years ago, and if you look at medical journal articles, there's something called a conflict of interest disclosure, where the authors have to disclose who paid for the study and if they've ever taken money or other materials from companies that might have an interest. And it's supposed to help us figure out whether a particular piece of evidence is trustworthy. It's a nice idea. It's got a lot of problems. And, to make a long story short, it's basically doesn't do what it's supposed to. But we had this insight that there's actually a lot of really interesting data there, because if you look not at the individual disclosure, if you look at the tens of thousands of journal articles, we have a lot of information on who's actually funding research. If only there were a way to get all that information, collate it, and put it in an open access database so that anyone who wanted to find out about this could go to that database.
Right.
Wouldn't that be great? There's already something called the Open Payments Database that one of the things that Obamacare did was it requires pharmaceutical companies and medical device manufacturers to report payments to physicians, and you can go to, I think it's called openpayments.gov, and you can see all these payments. Well, we want to do sort of the opposite end, which is not look at that reporting, but look at the reporting from individual researchers. And so we came up with this idea, this transparent science initiative, where we're actually trying to develop, natural language processing and machine languaging algorithms that'll allow us to automatically get this data and put it in a database, and then do research on the basis of that.
That's
and
pretty,
it's both high tech and low tech at the same time.
Well, I think that's, as you mentioned, the bad actors here, big pharma, medical device corps that want, their new thing to hit the market hard and fast. And it's about the channels through which people receive their information, I think, which is so vital. It's, can you trust where you're getting your info? Is it easily accessible? Is it something I can share with the people who actually need that information? And that's where the communication side of all of it, if you can make your platform more accessible, more visible, more easily, whatever it is, searchable, I think that's where you win.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
think
mean,
that's right. Yeah.
One of the,
And
one of the things is that, there's this saying that, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to make you believe he didn't exist. He or she did not exist. So they're very good about. I'm sure you're probably pinging up on somebody's monitor somewhere, or will be.
Little
so
flag.
this will be a documented legacy of our conversation. But look, it's worth the fight. There's certainly people. I mean, it's capitalism. And there is coining a phrase, a benevolent capitalism, if you will, and then there's just greed, and certainly rooting those out, the bad players and those things. They will milk it as long as they can. There's no question. I mean, that's what we have here, and we have some stories I'll share. Personal experiences that very clearly show, there are interests out there, and it's not conspiracy. It's not. It's just that's business, and it's in some regards acceptable, but here in the U.S. particularly. But when you even just get down to the economics, your father was World Bank.
was a World Bank economist.
So you start talking to economists about healthcare expenditures in the U.S. compared to other countries, and I would hope, and even in fact, if you have any colleagues who look at economics specifically for medicine delivery, I think we'd love to have an opportunity to chat with them too, because people don't really feel it. When you say 20% of your GDP is healthcare, it's like, oh, okay. No. That is horrific. That's when you look at other countries, 5%, 6%.
Who's the next? If you were like on a scale, if you were looking at who's second, and what is that number for them?
That would be whoever's the second capitalist. That would probably be, you have socialized medicine in the UK, you have socialized medicine in France, so that reduces, expenditures. There's no question. You still have private systems, and that's not being captured, but relatively, it is a unique property of healthcare in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the real question is not just expenses, but what are you getting in return?
Yeah.
And the big scandal is that Americans are not. You'd expect they would have the highest life expectancy, they'd have the best outcomes, and that's not the case.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Not the case.
Yeah.
Right.
The return on the investment is just not there.
Yeah.
What's the big, I think the other question is, and this is probably a subject for a completely separate conversation that we could have on this, but the disconnect for folks, I think there have been a few parodies, different shows, different movies that have kind of poked at this a little bit, but many Americans' resistance to feel as though there's anything outside of our system that's actually superior or actually better for health outcomes. It's kind of like, no, we pay more, and because of that, it is better. And there's just this innate association that doesn't seem to shake, even when people are really presented with details of systems that function on a much more efficient scale. So in your experience, if you run across people like that, what is that sort of, is there something behind all of that that roots them in that belief?
Well,
Cognitive dissonance?
Partly is just not knowing. You don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
right? That's part of it. And, also being misinformed and, not playing an active role. If you just kind of sit back idly, people will take advantage,
Yeah.
There's no question.
Right.
And, that's, look, when people are, you've got households, 2 incomes, barely pushing it by, you don't have time,
Yeah.
And that's a trap. Poverty is one of, I think is, really the greatest killer.
Cyclical.
Yeah. And, education and how it factors into society and the health and well-being of a country. I like to break it down to things that are very simple.
Right.
Not to dumb it down, but the greatest indicator for me is happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness is honestly the best indicator of health.
Yeah.
Apart from you can be happy and still have cancer, but
Right.
I'm just saying
Something
that
terrible.
there are unique qualities about it, and you look at other countries and utilization of medical services, incidence of depression and those sorts of things, and how it relates. But if you look at across the world, there are these areas called blue zones.
Mm-hmm.
And blue zones have these unique qualities where the life expectancy of those people, indigenous people in those areas, is substantially longer, into 100. And so they've identified 5 blue zones and really kind of dug in. And there are parts of it that their natural environment, their livelihood, all of those things, and we will gradually expand to visit some of these blue zones. Costa Rica has one in particular.
Yeah.
There's one here in the U.S. people don't hardly ever hear
Is
about. Mm-hmm. We'll get there. And I think there are lessons to be learned, and that's the reason for kind of exploring these things together. I think it's better to learn things together than to try to struggle through these things alone, and figure collectively what works, and what works for one person doesn't work for another.
Yeah, that's case by case, certainly.
And Nick, being there in Canada, and things are different. Like you said, it's striking. Sometimes you think not much of it, and then all of a sudden you get hit with something. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute,
Yeah, and I think, just to add one other thing onto that, and it circles around to something you already mentioned when you were talking about advocating for a patient. A lot of healthcare, it comes at the end of the story, right?
Yeah.
It's the acute care after someone has already gotten sick. And the U.S. has some of the best healthcare, has the best acute healthcare in the world, but the U.S. has chronically underinvested in public health, right? In all those things that bring people to the place where they need to go to the ED, where they wind up in the emergency department. And as you said earlier, like, what brought people here? Some of the best predictors of people getting sick are things like low education, low income, right? It's other things. It's what epidemiologists call social determinants of health. And a lot of the countries that are able to get a lot of bang for their buck, like Costa Rica, I actually taught a course where I brought U.S. kids to Costa Rica for a couple of years, and we looked at the healthcare system there.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
And it's what Earnest does. It's like family doctors. It's primary prevention. It's not that they have great MRI machines. It's that they do things like they send primary care physicians way, way out literally into the jungle to deliver primary preventive care to people. And it's cheap. It takes time and it takes effort, but that's what actually is going to prevent them from developing really complex medical conditions down the road.
Yeah.
And in the US, it's sort of this consumerist mentality of, like, not just the US, you see it in a lot of countries, Canada too, of if we have the right high-tech intervention, that's going to extend life. No. Okay. It's early childhood interventions. That's where you get a lot of your life extension.
Right. I mean, I have some of my patients, 50 years old, 60, 70, and, they come to me and like, I got all these problems. And I was like, yeah, I wish I'd met you 20 years ago. Because that would have been, the best. But, in 2001, I had a unique opportunity to get down to Cuba and see their healthcare system and their delivery. And I was just blown away. I was just like how they seed physicians that serve a community of 600.
Yeah.
And the stories behind it. I'd love to get back down there and get filming if that's possible. But, I think it'd be a great opportunity to talk a little bit more about Costa Rica itself. Maybe, because there's a physician there, family physician, born in the U.S. but then moved there and practices. He wakes up every morning, goes surfing, throws his surfboard on top of his SUV, and then goes out and sees patients, and he's happy.
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, wow, that's impressive.
Well, there's almost a trend, I think, especially what we see in America, but also just in other areas around the world, where I think this sort of has some bleed over into the world of healthcare and the world of medicine, but this need for almost immediate gratification. I think we have developed a society where if there's a need, we can get a solution that we want rather quickly. And I feel in some ways that's sort of moved over into the medical space, as we've talked about these preventative steps that so many and everybody can take from a very, very early age that would save just an incredible amount of money and grief and pain and all of these things down the road. I don't think we even are in that mindset. I think it's this idea that I'll fix it when we get there, kind of thing. And I'm guilty of that. I know I have that approach to certain things, and it's not good. I think everybody has an approach to something in their life where they take that route. But as far as from a social perspective, do you see that having some kind of effect, Nick, whenever you consider that's the mentality that so many other people live their life with?
Yeah, I think I think you've really put your finger on it, right? In a lot of ways, it's almost like philosophical in that, is health the responsibility of the individual, right? And there's this kind of pervasive idea, especially in the US, but in a lot of places, that really works with a kind of capitalist and consumerist mentality of the way to improve your health is through individual actions. Buy the right products, buy the right vitamins, buy the right exercise equipment, eat healthy, do this, do that.
Yeah. Go outside.
But a lot of the most important things are really outside of your individual control, right? Why is poverty such a good predictor of poor health?
Yeah.
It's because people who are poor have very little capacity to opportunity to make good decisions, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, you should eat all fruits and vegetables, but if you live in a food desert, if you can't get access to that, or you work 2 or 3 jobs and you can't cook for yourself, that's going to make a much bigger difference.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that a lot of societies, like Costa Rica, like Cuba, it's not just the universal health care. It's also a robust welfare state that sort of cares for its citizens in a lot of different registers. And again, relieves the stressors that are going to push them into poor health way down the road.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we got lots to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And plenty of opportunities to hopefully have you step back in with us. I think
Absolutely.
As we go through this ability to sort of sit here and let these thoughts effervesce almost will become much more fluid. And I hear some chirping voices in the background. I know someone special to you has a birthday or had a birthday yesterday. So
Yes, someone has just turned 12, and there are several friends who are they're doing a pretty good job of keeping it down. But
I'm impressed.
yeah, I think they're downstairs.
Great.
But it's my pleasure. I love it, and I'd love to jump in anytime on any subject.
Yeah, we'll get an opportunity when things are travel's a little bit eased up and the weather is a little bit warmer up there. I'm not opposed to coming with knee deep in snow, but snow and blue go well together. So
the snow is great. The sub-zero temperatures, sub-zero on both is not as good.
Are you almost clear of the? Well, you had a ton of snow up there. I know it was close to 40 centimeters or something, about 15 inches for U.S. folks.
I mean, the thing is, it's not going to melt. Right? The snow
It'll
doesn't
add
melt.
on and add on and on. That's great.
Seriously, right?
Yeah.
Like they clear it off the roads, but everywhere else, it's just going to be there another month or two.
A tunnel of pathways.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's 9 degrees Fahrenheit right here.
Really?
Right
Oh,
now.
wow.
Yeah.
little warmer down here, but wow. Okay. Well, I mean that's definitely something we'd love, to be able to travel and see you there. You were here obviously at one point, but again, Ernest has said this time and time again. It's about trying to find stories that there's so much in DC, and both of you know that being here and seeing the way this city is such a transient city, and it's so eclectic with the variety of people here. But it's always an honor and a pleasure to be able to go out and see someone in their space, and that's again the very essence of a house call is to be in someone's space and see and care for them in that zone. So we want to do more of it.
Yeah. Great.
Awesome.
Nick, thank you so much. It's always great to kind of reconnect with old folks and, kind of see where people have kind of gotten themselves. So, but we'll have more opportunities to do that too. And certainly anybody who's watching, anything you want to contribute moving forward to any other folks up north, who knows? Yeah. I'd love to connect with some family docs up there and, run around.
Yeah.
But anybody this is not specific just to physicians, it's nurse practitioners here in the U.S. What's the equivalent up there? And, anybody who wants to care for people is really what's, to me, is true.
Yeah. The ideal candidate.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
well,
Fantastic.
Great.
Nick,
That's
thanks
been awesome.
again.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
This certainly won't be our last time. We'll be able to do this again in the very near future and chat more. So
Sounds great.
all right.
Awesome, guys.
Take care, my friend.
Absolutely. See ya.
Alrighty.
Bye.
All right. So pretty fairly smooth. I mean,
Yeah.
had our little hiccups there at the beginning, and it's I think a good way of approaching this is always through observation. I watch a lot of these podcasts online, and every time I'm watching, it's of course there's an entertainment factor to it all, but there's also there's always a little bit of a note taking.
Yeah.
How
are we going to do it next
Yeah,
time?
what is it that you can do to streamline the process, make it that much easier, increase the quality, the production value, whatever that looks like. And there's a lot here, and as you see, it can at times be
I don't know how you do it.
A nightmare.
I know my tools and these things, but sometimes I'm not so. Maybe if a gadget's not working,
what can you do? And there are times like the network, right?
Yes.
It was like, I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
I know what I'm supposed to do.
Oh my gosh.
But it's not doing what I'm telling it to do. And
Yeah,
that's a frustration.
yeah.
But it's I think the essence of all this, and I think it's also part of medicine and it's part of art, and it's always there is a beauty and there's a beauty to simplicity. There's whenever you take everything away and you just evaluate a process at its core, I think there's a lot there, and it's easy to get caught up in what's new and what's fresh and what's what's exciting.
Yeah.
But even you talk about this with your care for patients. It's you and it's them, and it's that relationship.
Yeah.
And if you can find that line and you can ride it, that's where it's at. So we'll figure it out. We'll grow and build and refine
and we'll have
such is the process of
opportunities
growth.
to kind of talk about other things.
Yeah.
along the
Let me
way,
switch over. I'll
and,
switch to your cam here.
Yes.
So-
This is a book recently published by one of my good friends, Mikhail Kogan, and certainly going to get an opportunity to meet with him either in the studio or virtually. But it will have plenty more. I have another friend of mine, Jade, who I'll have to shame into coming onto the program.
Hey, we've got we have a few books over here that different folks have shared with us. This one, obviously, we've got one called Metabolical, not written by Todd Noble, but shared with us by Todd Noble, who's the founder of a company called Fugal. But we've met and interacted with a lot of great folks, and we'd love to be able to then pull them back into this environment and have those conversations in a way where it's recorded and documented, and you can share and learn a little bit from it all. So
and contribute. That's the big
and
part.
contribute.
It doesn't make sense for us to just put this up here for our own
Yeah.
giggle.
Right.
It's really being able to archive material that people find useful.
Yes,
And
yeah.
and I think even for myself, I like to be able to contribute to things and know that my contribution had some value to it.
Yes. Yeah.
so.
Yeah. So that's the goal. If you have ideas, if you have individuals, concepts, even videos or articles that you think would be important for us to reference, please reach out to us via email. If you go onto our Instagram at Earnest Medicine, you'll find a link in there. It's a Beacons link, and you can go in there and get contact and connect with us on every platform, essentially. And one of the great ways to do that is through email as well. So if you're on our website, send us a quick email, contact at earnestmedicine.org or info@earnestmedicine.org, and we can open up that line of dialogue with you and have that conversation. So thanks for watching wherever you are, and have a good night.
Absolutely. Be blessed.
All right. See ya.